Hello, everyone. Today is the day when you get to catch up on some of the research I've been doing in regard to our home bases. You may recall me mentioning a power node earlier in our journey. A power node is an intersection of 16 points in time and space that are hypothesized to be created from the residual energy left from the shadows. It is essentially a tesseract, or four-dimensional cube, that covers an entire area. As far as we know, 15 of them exist around the world. Our 12 home bases, the Great Pyramid and the Prophecy, and 2 other places known as the Tower of Lightning and the Colosseum of Warriors. There may be more, but these are ones studied extensively in the files that I have access to. And according to the research, these power nodes are also in magnetic flux, meaning that the magnetic and electrical charge changes depending on the movement and growing or shrinking of the tesseract itself. The constant flux causes ripples in the space-time continuum that aren't always present in the same spot, or at all, depending on the magnetic flux density, which is the calculation of the number of lines of force that passes through a material based on a formula that measures the relation of flux density to the magnetic field. In this case, the vector field is the entire space of the tesseract, the magnitude and direction of all 16 points. There are sometimes gateways to other universes and other times inside these areas due to these changes. And much like traveling at the speed of light can essentially slow time as we perceive it, the power nodes seem to have similar effects on people. Though the doorways are hidden in 4D space and could go unknown to our eye unless we can use tools to measure the charges and look for anomalies, they are very much there, possibly beside you. Right now, 4 test subjects successfully traveled to 3 days in the past in the data in these files, but due to the fluctuations, the files suggest that the tests were ended due to safety concerns of how these fields interacting with our bodies and minds. Of course, I had enough data for me to build my own time scoop with the energy from these power nodes, much like they did in these files. I was able to isolate the gateways and pull specific items through the portal with the use of the magnetic and electrical charge. I came up with the idea to actually cancel out the magnetic field on one end with a positive charge so the object I wanted could naturally just pull itself into the time or space of my choosing. Of course, this also meant that I sometimes accidentally canceled out electrons of the object, turning it into plasma without shape. You are all lucky enough to be the first non-casualties, and I suspect it is due to the prophecy and how you are all somehow tied to the shadows and the ancient relic, the green bowl, in some way. You might all be fixed points in time that must exist at this moment, or I might have perfected my formula. But the data I am collecting suggests that I might have to account for even more changes in the future. The gateways have been extremely active since you arrived, which is what I've been studying for the past several days. But the shadows have also been somewhat limited within the area of each tesseract, which is where you all are, though some places seem to have a larger impact. One such area is at the Misty Forest, where there seems to be a specific element that I have yet to study fully enough in these files. In the future, I will need to tap into 6 specific power nodes to help us break some sort of a seal that seems to be on several other places that we need to go in our journey. What these nodes are depend on our results in this league, for as we know, the shadows seem to be wreaking havoc on this test to try and limit our power. I believe we can use these nodes to help us win this battle. My early calculations show that the power within each node could be isolated and captured into a single point for easier use and a more constant flux density. My math seems to say that the shadows and power nodes repel each other. But while the shadow seems to have limited power within each tesseract because of this, the shadows surround them and seem to be able to change the shape of the power node, which in turn affects our numbers. I believe that this is why some teams' home records are struggling and why several road teams have won. While each of us should be tied to the power of our specific nodes that I use to bring you here, the power isn't always present, and it will make this journey even more challenging. I've been compiling our home and away records, and they are very interesting. A lot more data is needed, though, before I release them to you. Luckily, the 6 candidates to be chosen still have a lot of time to make up for lost ground. And we are closing in on the halfway point. That's right, everyone. It's time for round 7. Watch your step. The activity in the nodes are only increasing each week. But don't worry.
Unit 9 is being turned into atoms. chance to be a legend, fight for humanity, reach the goal. It's a quest for the green ball. Green ball.
Welcome to the quest for the Green Ball, the Shadows of Chaos. I'm your host, Anthony Yotso, bringing you another installment of this fantasy football show with a twist. I don't know about you, but my brain hurts after the lesson we just received by the mysterious stranger. It might be over all of our heads, but in simple terms, the home bases are all volatile, but are still proving to be a weapon against the Shadows. We'll see how all that plays out, but when looking at this past week's results, I am getting a little worried for some of us. Later, I'll talk about our next round of matchups, and I will also have another verdict on an NFL topic this time, in another installment of The Good, the Bad, and the Idiotic. But first, let's get to the Week 6 results. Remember, the Titans of the Eastern Territory seems to like being away from home as he traveled to the Western Territory's misty forest to take on the Stellar Bitches. Remember, the Titans entered with a 69.5% chance to win, and the computers were definitely correct as he dominated in a 145.94 to 85.74 victory. Being the worst team overall in the league can be good sometimes, as he was able to get both Darrell Williams and Khalil Herbert off waivers. They combined for 201 yards and 3 touchdowns, outscoring Elliott and Sanders 38.1 to 18.5. CeeDee Lamb and Cooper Kupp had 2 touchdowns apiece as well, and Joe Burrow did enough to keep up with Matthew Stafford on the other side. Also, the Bills defense had the worst game of the season for the Bitches. Remember, the Titans move to 2-4. The Stellar Bitches fall to 3-3. My Heart Will Go On of the Central Territory travel to take on the Eastern Territory's risky business at the Old Kingdom in search of a much-needed win. And a 54% chance proved correct, as My Heart Will Go On came away with a 99.6 to 87.78 victory. Aaron Rodgers still owns the Bears with 3 total scores, and Swift added a late touchdown. Both teams' defense and kicker combos actually tied 25-25, and while Tom Brady had 2 TDs and Andrews caught another TD, yards ended up being the difference here, as did the Alvin Kamara bye. Both teams are now 3-3 overall. Loki Lebowski Thor, the Central Territory, traveled to the Sea of Angels in the Western Territory to take on the Siamese Dreamcats. This, of course, was a 50-50 toss-up, and it played out that way, with Lebowski Thor holding on to a slim 104.36 to 101.78 victory. The Dreamcats had kicker Tyler Bass on Monday night get within a 30-plus yard field goal of the win, but the game script didn't turn out that way despite his 50-yard field goal keeping the game close. This matchup actually looked to be in the Dreamcats' hands on Sunday before Kyler Murray decided to throw for several touchdowns, 4 to be exact. Lebowski Thor also had 2 scores and over 20 points by Fournette, and Zerline stepped up with 13 points. Delvin Cook, Latavius Murray, and the Ravens defense did well for the Cats, but Lamar Jackson was vultured constantly, and it meant a subpar quarterback performance. Lebowski Thor moves into first place in the Central Territory at 4-2. The Dreamcats fall to 2-4 after a second straight tough defeat. The Eastern Territory's Green Acres traveled to Ghost Mountain to take on the Central Territory's Meow Master. Green Acres had an 84.8% chance to win, but somehow, despite taking 4 zeros, Meow Master actually kept this one close. Green Acres did end up getting the victory, 111.18 and 93.7. Heineke struggled, but Mixon had 153 yards and a score, and Thielen added 128 yards and a score. Henderson also continued to shine in a big way with 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Cowboys defense also added another touchdown. But Derrick Henry was a maniac. He had 156 yards and 3 scores, including a 70-plus yard touchdown for the bonus point. Hopkins added 2 TDs, and Hurts had a passing score and 2 rushing scores. Makes you wonder what would have happened had Meow Master decided to coach. Green Acres moves to 4-2 and is now in first place in the Eastern Territory. Meow Master falls to 2-4. The Western Territory's Gal decided to actually coach at the Great Superior Eye against the Central Territory's Great Superior Superb Owls. But I'm not sure it would have mattered anyways. The defending champion Gal dropped another big score, winning 143.1 to 89.38. Dak Prescott outdueled Patrick Mahomes with 3 touchdowns, and a Chubb injury absolutely crushed the dreams of the Superb Owls as Gal's combination of Najee Harris and Jonathan Taylor combined for 3 scores. Waddle came off Gal's bench and added 2 touchdowns, and the Rams defense took advantage of the extremely bad New York Giants with 4 forced turnovers and just 11 points allowed. The Superb Owls fall 2-3-3 and out of first in the Central Territory. Gal moves to 4-2 and remains in first in the Western Territory. And that brings us to the Game of the Week, which saw Eastern Territory's multiple scoregasms travel to play Uncle Justy at his Western Territory home, Skyward Peaks.
This was a 50-50 toss-up, and oh my, it came down to the final few plays on Monday night with so many variables and potential points for both sides, with the rivalry award, the paddle, up for grabs. It was a low-scoring game, but there were some crazy moments here with Uncle Justy coming into the Monday game down 40 points, but Josh Allen had over 350 yards and 3 TDs, and Stephon Diggs caught one of those scores. On the other side, Ryan Tannehill was vultured constantly by Derrick Henry, and it led to a measly 216 passing yards, 1 TD, an interception on his line that doomed the scoregasms, of course. What's crazy here is things seem to be falling apart for Uncle Justy on Sunday. One of the keys to the game was James Robinson on the other side, over 100 total yards and a score early on Sunday in London. The other key to the game, Kareem Hunt, injured his calf on what looked like a non-contact play, so no one ever wants to see that, and he was carted off the field. And then the scoregasms also had Aaron Jones add 110 yards and a score, and the Colts defense doubled up the Packers defense in points. So it was obviously in the scoregasm's favor at that point. But when you look at the big picture, the quarterback play was the big difference here. Allen came up huge. And Tannehill played second fiddle to Derrick Henry, as usual, a common theme so far in 2021. So Uncle Justy not only comes away with the paddle and keeps pace with defending champion Gal in the Western Territory, but he also becomes the first in 2021 to win 2 games of the week, also winning in week 4 at the Steel Shores. Moving to 4-2 overall with this win, and the scoregasms fall to 2-4. But I'm once again joined by Uncle Justy, who must be on cloud 9 with his second time on this show in just 3 weeks. What's going on, man? How you feeling?
You know, no place like home. And Derrick Henry is the man. He's my favorite right now by far.
Yeah, for sure. Well, also, you know, talking about no place at home, you're 3-0 at Skyward Peaks. You got to be feeling good there. You know, maybe the Dragon's on your side. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, it was a pretty wild week, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I do have to ask, I mean, were you a little bit worried going into Monday night? You know, the game was close, but did you have confidence that your 4 players that you had going were going to score 41 more points than Ryan Tannehill?
Well, I was trying to do the math. I was like, this is going to take a heck of an effort by everybody. I was just hoping that Tannehill would throw to Julio if he did, score touchdowns, and then that didn't happen. And when he did get his touchdown, and then he started throwing to AJ Brown at the end of the game, which I was like, oh, I don't like this at all. And then Julio hurt, Kareem Hunt was hurt, and Saquon Barkley is trash in the first place. I'm going to go no running backs next week, I think.
I understand how that is. And I do understand, too, how important it is to win to stay on track in our tough league. I mean, you had Gal apparently waking up just to take me out, decided to coach, and drops 140 plus points out of nowhere. I did not expect that. My team didn't really do all that great either, kind of teetering on like should be doing better, but had a rough week. But obviously with the win, you keep pace with Gal. So, you have to be feeling pretty good with this win to be able to do that with two games separate all 12 of us. So with 8 weeks to go, it's going to be a battle here. I mean, just what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, absolutely. It was a wild week for a lot of teams this week. A lot of really low scoring games, low scoring, matches. And then, you get the people like Gal that wake up and score 140 just fun. So it's anybody's game anymore. Yeah. With such a close separation through all of us.
Yeah, and obviously, you kind of touched on a little bit with your team, and all of our teams are dinged up a little bit. Injuries and buys are always the challenge. I think that makes or breaks teams. I think that's why it's harder to make the playoffs than it is to win once you get in, because you just kind of need a couple of luck, maybe your star player to be there. But, like I said before, this league has, 2 games separating all of us, 8 weeks to go. So there's plenty of time for both glory and heartbreak. But, how worried are you with your team? Yeah, Kareem Hunt go down. Who knows how long he's going to be out. Saquon Barkley continues to kind of be injury prone. You also have T.Y. Hilton, Julio Jones, and Rob Gronkowski all dinged up. And, they've obviously all done things in the games they played. Gronkowski for sure with all the touchdowns he was getting. But and Kareem Hunt, I mean, he was a top 5 running back at one point. So I just, are you a little worried about that? Are you looking for some trades, some waiver wire? What's going on there?
Well, I'm going to have to do something because on top of all that, the Bills have a bye next week. So Zach Moss, Stephon Diggs, and Josh Allen are all out on top of what you just mentioned.
Yeah, that's tough, man. and I know those bye week hells all too well. I don't know if I'm lucky or unlucky that my bye week hells are going to be in like weeks 13 and 14 because of the way the buys work this year, week 12 maybe as well. So, I'm kind of hoping that I could get other guys going on my team for that. But I also noticed you stashed in Michael Thomas and Jeff Wilson on your reserve, and now Hunt's going there. I mean, are you also worried that you have no more spots on your reserve with all these injuries, because as we all know, every week someone's going down, it's just roll the dice.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. The 3 reserve spots are nice for teams like mine right now. So that helps a little bit. Hopefully those question marks turn to healthy, statuses before the games start this week, and we're just going to have to play it by ear. I definitely need a quarterback and a running back for sure, because otherwise I won't fill a roster right now. So we'll just have to see what happens.
Yeah, you do get to enjoy this win, though, obviously getting the 4-2 and the paddle that you won. And you can probably use that to protect yourself from the dragon roaming around Skyward Peaks as well.
So, right here. This is going on right now. Here we go. Paddle.
You get to hold on to that until your next time playing. So if you don't play in the playoffs, you get to keep that all year. So you gotta be excited about that. I have my golden pen that I won in my rivalry award, and I'm sure I'll have a couple others, rivalries going up here. But I do have to ask, with all of our lore, I mean, we'd be getting some crazy things from our mysterious stranger. Do you trust him at this point, or are you still a little uncertain about the mysterious stranger?
I'm not sure what to think. It's one of those things that could go either way. Kind of like the game this week, and kind of like the last ping pong match that Joanne and I played as well. Kind of went very similar to our game this week. So, just looking to keep pulling out W's and take it from there.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks to Uncle Justy for joining me this week for the second time this season. And of course, he does have a chance at being back on the show with weeks 13 and 14. Those games of the weeks are still to be announced the week of, for potential playoff runs or tiebreaker scenarios, whatever. It's just going to be the best games with the possible scenarios that we're looking for in our league. So he definitely can still be back there. Plus, he can be back in the playoffs, as I expect to have all the playoff teams on this show as well. So I'm sure you're excited about that, man. You're already 2-0 on the games of the week. You're stepping up in prime time.
Absolutely. Let's shine bright.
All right. Next, I will go a little bit away from fantasy football for a second because I need to get my 2 cents into this. I will give my verdict on the strange NFL investigation into the Washington football team and how a leak took down John Gruden and overshadowed the real reason that the investigation was taking place. So stay tuned for that.
For those that don't know all the details, the NFL investigation into the Washington football team began at the same time they decided to change their nickname in July of 2020. The Washington Post published an article with 15 former female employees alleging sexual harassment for almost 2 decades by the team staff. Owner Dan Snyder was first to launch an investigation, but the NFL took over about a month later in August 2020. The Washington Post published a follow-up report that same month that alleged that Snyder, quote, presided over an organization in which women say they have been marginalized, discriminated against, and exploited. Almost a year later in July, the NFL fined Washington $10 million for a highly unprofessional work environment, especially for women. Snyder stepped away from day-to-day duties, giving his wife Tanya the CEO position. During this investigation, over 600,000 emails were examined, and a leak to the New York Times gave us the John Gruden news, where emails from Gruden to former team president Bruce Allen were found to have a pattern of being both homophobic and misogynistic, criticizing gay players, female officials, and even exchanging photos of a topless Washington cheerleader or cheerleaders, allegedly. That, of course, led to Gruden resigning from the LA Raiders last week. And now, attorneys of 40 former employees are calling for the rest of the emails to be disclosed. But the NFL has closed the investigation and said that no further emails will be released due to confidentiality reasons. However, it is reported by the New York Times that NFL General Counsel Jeff Pash, who is a confidant of Commissioner Roger Goodell, gave Ellen sympathetic assurances about the scandal, and that there were other alleged emails where Ellen joked with Pash about Native Americans and the NFL diversity efforts. That doesn't look good, of course. Attorney Lisa Banks, who represents the 40 former employees, with some being former cheerleaders, but not all of them, is calling for not only more of the emails to be released, but information from the 120 people who were interviewed during this investigation. Of course, this is a scandal that doesn't seem to go away, and it probably won't go away, but the NFL is known for covering up these types of instances that lead to bad PR. All of the Patriots and Tom Brady scandals, of course, were essentially covered up, with fines being levied and draft picks being taken away, but no real information from the extent of those scandals like Spygate and Deflategate came out to us. And then there is the Bountygate that hurt the Saints. We learned of some information, but not all. And while the Saints were put in a rough spot with suspensions, they clearly weren't the only team involved in paying players to hurt other star players. So we didn't get the whole story. There are countless numbers of NFL players accused of sexual harassment, assault, or rape that had investigations swept under the rug as well. You also had the Ray Rice scandal where they were going to suspend him just 2 games after alleged domestic abuse, but then a video got out that proved domestic abuse. They had to do something else, of course. He got suspended way longer. It makes you wonder that if the Washington Post and New York Times didn't break these stories, if anything big would have actually happened. For one, would they have protected John Gruden? I mean, probably, based on their past history. They probably would have given him a golden jet and an island as NFL Humanitarian of the Year in 2022, for all we know. And they're obviously protecting many more big names here. When you look at their reasoning of not releasing the emails for confidentiality purposes, maybe even the mascots are implicated in this. We have no idea. All this is just alleged stuff, but it's something that it just makes you wonder how deep this goes and how much they're covering up and how many people they're actually saving that might have emails that implicate them in this type of bad behavior. And guess what, everyone, anyone listening to this, if there isn't another leak, they're probably going to try their hardest to not release any more information unless they're successfully sued in the court system. They have more plugs to their leaks than an actor in Hollywood's hair. My verdict of this whole scandal is that it is bad. Bad for the culture of the NFL, because what we do know shows a clear gap between being truly diverse and inclusive and continuing down the path of that old white guys can be quite racist, misogynistic, and homophobic, especially these old rich owners and even some of the coaches. It's bad for the NFL because this is yet another scandal that overshadows many other storylines that they'd probably want. You got undefeated Arizona. That's a great story. You got the resurgence of Dallas, the so-called America's team. I'm sure they love that. The overtime games of epic proportions that we've had, there have been so many crazy endings to these games. You also get the "I still own you" words from Aaron Rodgers to Chicago in one of the biggest rivalries in sports, which is also technically good for the NFL. But instead, we're talking about emails and cover-ups again. And most importantly, this is bad for women around the NFL and in general. One of the things that really annoys me about this whole case is that the investigation started because of allegations of sexual harassment by the Washington football team against its female employees. It's now about John Gruden and homophobic and racist tones from those who didn't understand that emails are not private. The $10 million fine as well for the Washington football team. The team is valued at $4.2 billion. It's like a slap on the wrist. Unless we get more information, we're never going to know the extent of these allegations and whether the punishment actually fits the crime. With all the allegations against players, former players and coaches throughout the last 5 years, and the fact that the NFL saw the Ray Rice video and thought 2 games, and then the public saw it and they realized, oh man, this was leaked. We got to give them way more games. It makes me think that we do need to see these emails and investigative reports so that this type of thing can stop once and for all. Because I guarantee you, if more gets out, the NFL will act in a big way to make sure that the good PR returns and that they don't lose billions of dollars. Because in the end, money is what they care about. Because if they cared about people, we would already know more, and the Washington football team would probably have a little bit harsher a penalty than this $10 million nonsense. Now, this wasn't a great story, of course, and I hate that I even have to talk about it, but I really thought I needed to get my 2 cents. I really hope that the truth comes out and that any alleged victims get some closure here, of course. I definitely believe that even if the truth is really bad, that it can be used to change the culture in the league and to help us progress to a future where the biggest scandal is a blown referee call, even if it costs us a fantasy win. Because a blown referee call is definitely better than all of this news that has been coming out. Now let's get back to some better things as we look ahead to Week 7. 3-3, My Heart Will Go On of the Central Territory hosts the 2-4 Siamese Dreamcats of the Western Territory at Steel Shores. My Heart Will Go On has a 58% chance to win based on expected moves here. Aaron Rodgers versus Lamar Jackson will be huge, as will Chase versus Adams at wideout. Brown can cancel out Jackson passing TDs as well, and Crosby helps the Cats steal points for every Rodgers or Adams score. 4-2 Uncle Justy of the Western Territory hosts 2-4 Remember the Titans of the Eastern Territory at Skyward Peaks, where Uncle Justy remains undefeated. Remember the Titans has a mind-boggling 88.6% chance to win, though, as Uncle Justy is in a bye-week hell. Bridgewater will need to keep pace with Burrow, and Ingram and Jamal Williams will most likely need touchdowns to keep pace with Darrell Williams and Cordarrelle Patterson. The battle at defense should also be very important here. The Central Territory's 3-3 Great Superior Superb Owls travel to the Western Territory to take on 3-3 to Stellar Bitches at Misty Forest. Moves should be made here, but at the moment, based on potential moves, the Owls hold a 60% chance to win. Mahomes versus Stafford and Sanders versus Jacobs are two matchups that the Bitches will most likely need to win. Hill versus Evans will also be interesting at wide receiver due to Hill's quad injury, but the matchup will probably come down to waiver pickups by the Bitches, who are missing Buffalo's defense, a defense that has scored her a lot of points. The Eastern Territory's Risky Business, who is 3-3, heads to the Western Territory to take on first place 4-2 Galgal at the Golden Sands. Moves also have to be made in this matchup, as Galgal finally coached last week, and it helped the defending champion earn 140 points for the second straight week. But with the need for a quarterback here, coaching is needed once again. Based on expected roster moves, Risky Business holds a 59% chance to win. Taylor versus Kamara, and wide receivers Woods and Waddle versus McLaurin and Lockett will be big matchups here. Risky Business does need a defense, with the Rams getting the Lions. In an Eastern versus Central Territory first place matchup, 4-2 Green Acres travels to the Philosopher's Swamp to take on 4-2 Loki Lebowski Thor. Moves need to be made here as well, but Green Acres does hold a 62.2% chance to win based on what is expected. Tagovailoa versus Murray could be interesting here, especially if AJ Green can cancel out TDs. Henderson and Mixon versus Fournette and Gordon, it is also interesting. And the battle at defense could be a deciding factor, as that's one of the last games in this matchup for now. And now it is time for the Game of the Week. In this next Game of the Week, we get a second chance for the Eastern Territory's multiple scoregasms, who are now 2-4, also losing a heartbreaker during last week's highlighted match on the road. This time, Central Territory foe 2-4 Meow Master stands in her way of getting back into the mix. Meow Master, of course, topped the multiple scoregasms back in the 2016 Green Bowl final for the first of two titles in Meow Master's career. The Scoregasms are clearly looking for some revenge here, and they get to host at the Gateway Islands.
Hello again. This week, we go to a stop on our journey with an epic rematch of past battles for the ancient relic, with a loss putting the other team in a very bad place. But before we get to any of the storylines in this one, let's take a look at our next stop, Gateway Islands. Gateway Islands is an insane place in that it seems to be a spot where the shadows came to draw in ships from around the land. Ships with high-tech equipment and science labs to try and study what was happening with the weather. High winds and vicious storms absolutely annihilated this place from the start. Many ships were sunk, many gathered data before sinking, but good luck getting to it with the waves that crash on the small landmasses all around here. In our lore, the islands were a supposed lock to the reaching of this land. But if you didn't have the correct key, you would be lost forever in some sort of a demon triangle. In these files, I noticed that many believe the shadows came here as a distraction to lure away protection from other areas, including the Old Kingdom. But based on what I see, I would say that the shadows actually formed the Demon's Triangle, and that Gateway Islands were just a casualty of this formation. I also found disappearances of other flying and floating machines from the past, and more evidence from my hypothesis is that the data that was transmitted right before the rest was corrupted shows reports of strange machines suddenly appearing, making this original battle the reason for all of the activity throughout time. While I would love to see the old data machines and see if I could recover this data, I wouldn't go swimming around just yet. The Demon's Triangle might have actually spread around the entire Gateway Islands now, and I don't want you to disappear, never to be seen again. Now back to the match.
The multiple scoregasms hold a 65.4% chance to win here based on Meow Master's lack of coaching history. The Ryan Tannehill versus Derrick Henry show is an interesting comparison. Henry is a beast, and if he is rushing for scores, that means Tannehill isn't throwing for scores. And even if Kansas City scores a bunch, it doesn't actually mean that Henry will be abandoned. The defensive struggle with Arizona versus San Francisco could also be interesting, and whoever scores more points between Aaron Jones and DeAndre Hopkins will probably go a long way. But I'm looking at two players to be potential game changers, even if it's on more of a minor scale. For the scoregasms, I'm looking at running back Elijah Mitchell. Mitchell seems to be getting number one running back touches, but San Francisco does like to spread the wealth around a little bit. Even so, the injury to Trey Lance most likely means Jimmy G is back behind center for the 49ers, and that means that Mitchell might not be vultured as much as he could have been with a mobile quarterback. Still, Deebo Samuel sometimes gets rushes as well, even down at the goal line, and trusting who will get carries on this offense can be risky. But the reward could also be quite golden. Mitchell has big playability in both the passing and running game and was used more than Trey Sermon in Week 5 before the bye week, which bodes well. For Meow Master, I'm looking at wide receiver A.J. Brown. Meow Master needs many Beast games to win while taking zeros, and Brown has been underwhelming so far in 2021 with 1 touchdown and only 221 yards so far. But 91 of those yards came last week, and with Julio Jones banged up, Brown might be called upon in a potential shootout with Kansas City. Brown also gives Meow Master a potential block on Tannehill touchdowns, which also could be big in this matchup. Brown had over 1,000 yards and 19 touchdowns the last 2 seasons, and so I wouldn't expect him to remain sluggish if he is healthy enough. Derrick Henry is on pace for the most carries in an NFL season in history, so at some points you would think the Tennessee offense has to throw the ball. Brown could have his breakout game this week. And that is the show for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we get more from our mysterious stranger and take a look back at the first half of our regular season in this league. Before we go, here are the updated power rankings headed into Week 7. Please follow the SunDried Tomatoes YouTube channel and watch content including original shows like Legends of the Diamond, random reactions, and Brewing the Facts, the SunDried Tomatoes podcast in video form, and other sports, brewing, or entertainment-related videos. You can like the Facebook page and follow me on Instagram at eclectic_yotso for news updates and just to get to know me better.